Point at AFR.net.
I agree with Brian Fisher of the American Family Association, who blogged Where Angels Fear to Tweet, saying permits should not be granted to build even one more mosque in the United States of America. Exactly.
So that is our signal that it's time to turn our attention to the religion of Islam. Our old friend Stephen Colbert. Hang on a second. Disconnected my earbud once again. But we were talking in the first segment. We'll continue to take calls on this topic. Pledge of Allegiance being changed at Rocky Mountain High School from under God to under Allah. This is not an insignificant thing because Allah is a different God than the God of the Bible. We've talked about this before. We and Muslims, we do not worship the same God. And Muslims will prove it to you. Muslims will prove to you. They will deny that they worship the same God as we do. It's only people that are trying to be nice, trying to be nicer than Jesus, that believe that Christians and Muslims worship the same God. And they've been deceived, or they're fooled, or they're fooling other people, because Christians and Muslims do not worship the same God. Ask a Muslim, for instance, does Allah, the one you believe is the true and living God, does he have a son? And a Muslim will tell you no. That's blasphemy. In most Muslim nations, that would be a capital crime to affirm that. And if you go from being a Muslim and convert to being a Christian, believing that God has a son, believing that his son was God in flesh, that's a capital crime. You'd be put to death for that. So you ask a Muslim, does Allah have a son? They'd say, no, that's blasphemy. That's heresy. You can die for that in a Muslim country. You ask a Muslim, do you believe that the Son of Allah is God in human flesh? Do you believe that Jesus was God incarnate? Absolutely not. That's heresy. We'll cut your head off if you try to dispense that message in most Muslim countries around the world. So we worship Jesus as God. We freely do that. John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Verse 14, the Word, who is God, became flesh and dwelt among us. So we believe that Jesus is God in the flesh. We worship him as God. That's the way the Gospel of John ends up. Thomas falls at the feet of Jesus, my Lord and my God. And some people say, well, Thomas was just overwhelmed and he was just carried away. And I say, well, in that case, that doesn't bother me what Thomas said then. What bothers me is what Jesus said. Because Thomas gets done saying, my Lord and my God, and Jesus doesn't say, well, that's a nice sentiment, Thomas, but you just went a little bit too far. Let's back it up. I appreciate what you're trying to do. Jesus didn't say that. He said, blessed are you because you have seen and believed. Blessed are those who have not seen me and have yet believed. So he commends him. Said, Thomas, you finally got it. I am your Lord and I am your God. You ask a Muslim, do you worship Jesus as God? They would say, absolutely not. That's heresy. So it's not an insignificant thing when the name of the Muslim God is substituted for the Christian God in the Pledge of Allegiance. It's not an incidental thing whatsoever. And talking about this creeping, let's grab a call from Ken in Baldwin. Ken, Baldwin, Mississippi, welcome. What's on your mind?
About this kid with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir.
First of all, I'm a Christian. I know the Lord is my personal Savior. Second of all, I served my country in the United States Navy in the submarine service. Third of all, if these people don't like America when they come here, they come here because they want what we've got. When they get here, they want to change it the way it was when they get home. When they get back here, they want the same thing they had at home. If they're not satisfied here, let them all go back home. They don't need to be here.
Well, and that's exactly what Franklin Graham said. We played that soundbite, last week, and Franklin Graham, and he wasn't being mean about it. He was being very polite and very calm, and he wasn't waving his hands. He wasn't on some kind of a rant, and he says, look, Sharia law is bad. Islam is a wicked, evil religion, and Sharia law is terrible. We do not want Sharia law in this country. I've got a story in the stack about a Muslim in Arizona that nearly beat his wife to death, suspected her of having an affair with another man. He drug her out behind the house. He was beating her. He beat her, threatened to throw her in the lake. She cannot swim, almost choked her to death. And all the while, he is telling her, I have the right to do this because Islam tells me I can. Islam gives me that kind of authority over you as my wife. It's an evil, wicked religion. And this guy was in Arizona. This guy was living in Arizona. And so Franklin Graham said, look, if Sharia law is what you want, then maybe it'd be better for you to move to a Muslim land that's governed by Sharia law. If that's the way you want to live, there's 57 Muslim countries around the world that observe Sharia law. I would encourage you to go there where you can find a climate and a legal system that suits your preferences. Don't come here and try to completely transform what's worked for us for 225 years.
That's right. I agree with that 100%. These young kids have no idea what was given for this country by the men who have died for this country. And they just come here and they do as they please. I don't like that at all.
All right. Well, listen, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that we should slow down. In fact, I've said for some time, that's the Stephen Colbert clip, that we ought to suspend Islamic immigration because there is no compatibility between a Christian culture and an Islamic culture. These things, they just simply cannot coexist. And we've got the story, that about the husband, the Muslim husband in Arizona, looking at the story right here. An Arizona man is in police custody after allegedly punching and trying to strangle his wife, reportedly telling her that his, quote, Islamic belief, end quote, gives him the right to kill her. So in other words, he's saying, look, if I kill you as my wife, I'm being a good Muslim. If a Christian were to do that, he would be being a bad Christian. That is the difference. This guy is saying, look, I am killing you, and this makes me, I'm murdering my wife, and this makes me a good Muslim. There is no Christian husband in the world who could say that because Christianity teaches a man to love his wife and to give himself up for her. That's the Christian standard. So if a Christian kills his wife, and Christians do, I mean, it happens. Christians murder their wives. That makes them a bad Christian. When a Muslim does it, this guy's saying makes me a good Muslim. According to court paperwork, Ansar Mohammed attacked his wife over the weekend, reportedly carried her from the family home to his car, driving and parking behind the local pharmacy where he punched her repeatedly, attempted to cut off her air supply, brought her back home, threatened to throw her in a nearby lake, and took away her phone so she couldn't call 911. Now, over in Britain, there's a Trojan horse program where they're trying to take over the educational system. So you look at Britain, you can see where the Muslim Brotherhood wants to go in the United States. And in this one, there's 25 schools that are part of this Trojan horse program where they're trying to slip Islamic theology into the educational curriculum there. And here's a school in Birmingham. I've got a good friend that was a missionary in Birmingham for years and years and years. He said, man, this is exactly what is going on there. Birmingham school, Birmingham, I think is how they say it there, school at the heart of an alleged Islamist plot to take over state institutions, allowed students to express positive views about terrorism, including the 9/11 attacks and the 7/7 attacks on the London subway. The students were allowed to say positive things about those terrorist attacks in a school in the UK. And the 7/7 attack, that happened in the United Kingdom, in the London subway. Staff has been advised not to bring soldiers into the school for visits. Remember that one soldier had his throat slit by two Muslims in broad daylight in the middle of the day as carrying out the will of Allah. You know, in Nigeria, maybe you've seen this story, they kidnapped the Boko Haram. It's a Muslim group, terrorist group. They kidnapped over 220 girls there. They've disappeared. They don't know where they are. Now they're finding out that these girls are being forced to marry their Islamic extremist abductors. So they've been kidnapped as Christians. They're 16 to 18, going to a Christian school. They've been kidnapped, and they have been forced to enter into these marriages with the Muslim militants that kidnapped them. And the cost, if you want to buy one of these girls who has been kidnapped, as long as you have Islam, you will have slavery. Trust me about this, ladies. As long as there is Islam on the face of this earth, you will have slavery. It is an Islamic doctrine. And so they're selling these girls for $12. You want to buy a Christian bride between the ages of 16 and 18 that we have kidnapped right out of their school, all it'll cost you is $12. And, the UK, Subway is becoming Sharia compliant. Catch this. Subway has cut bacon and ham from 185 of their stores because the Muslims want it that way. So 185 stores in Subway. If you want a ham sandwich, you want bacon on your sandwich, and you're a regular guy, you're a Christian, has no problem with that, you can't get it. Why? Because the Muslims do not want it sold in their neighborhoods, and Subway has meekly capitulated. And then one last story before we go to the phones. This is again, well, I don't have, let me save this. We'll take a couple of calls here before the end of this segment. But a guy arrested in the UK for quoting Winston Churchill. For quoting what Winston Churchill said about Islam, he been taken off to jail. We'll talk about that in a moment. Let's grab a call from David in Jackson, Mississippi. David, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I missed the very beginning of the show, and I just had a couple questions and then also a couple comments.
All right, shoot.
First, do we know who initiated this is concerning doing the Pledge of Allegiance in Arabic. Was it the principal or the student that initiated this, or do we know?
I think it was a student cultural club.
Okay, and do we know what religion the student is?
No, I don't have any information about that.
Okay, so then I guess another question would be, is the outcry over this because it was done in a different language? Had it been Spanish, would it have been the same?
Nope, it's been done in French, it's been done in Spanish.
Just because it was done in Arabic, or because specifically the word Allah was in it?
Because the word Allah was in it in place of the word God.
To that, I agree with you basically, but yet I did grow up overseas where I did grow up with Muslims, Christians, and Jews, and what we run into is the word in Arabic is Allah, and there are thousands and thousands of Christians, and the word for God is Allah. In the Bible, God is Allah. So I understand they serve a different God, but whenever we use the word Allah, it doesn't automatically mean that person is a Muslim or they're referring to the God of Muhammad. The word Allah is also the same word that is used for the God that Christians believe with God the Father, God the Son, and it's all the same word. So the word itself is being stereotyped, or whenever it's used, it's just assumed it's Muslim. It's the only thing I have in that, because I have many, many, many friends.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. And I understand, David, what you're saying. And I've talked to friends of mine that are missionaries in Muslim countries, and that's an issue that they have to wrestle with. But the problem is, David, we are not in a Muslim country. We are not in an Arabic-speaking country. We are in America. And when people use the word Allah in America, that is a reference to the Muslim God. And that is the problem here. Everybody knows in America when the word Allah is spoken, that is a reference to the Muslim God. And that's what lit these people off. And I think it should have. Focal Point, AFR Talk. We'll be right back. Stay with us.